stopped, they stopped. When I hurried, they kept pace. Back at the house, I ate quickly, then retrieved my binoculars and a hunting knife. I have never been a hunter, but I keep the knife for camping trips. Armed with these, I felt slightly more secure as I returned to the work site. The afternoon passed without incident, though the sensation of being watched never abated. This pattern continued for the next 5 days. Each day I would work at my cutting site, and each day, the presence, whatever it was, seemed to grow bolder. The breathing became louder, the footsteps less concealed. Twice I saw branches move, as if something had brushed against them, but the movement was not accompanied by any visible cause. By Friday, my nerves were frayed. I had begun carrying my phone in a chest pocket, recording everything while I worked, hoping to capture some evidence of whatever was stalking me. But when I reviewed the recordings each evening, I heard only the sounds of my equipment and the natural noises of the forest. That Friday afternoon, July 21st, was when everything escalated. The day was unusually still, with no wind to rustle the trees or mask other sounds. I had been working steadily since morning, trying to ignore the now familiar sensation of being watched, when my chainsaw sputtered and died out of gas. In the sudden silence, the breathing was unmistakable, closer than it had ever been before. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, and that's when I saw it, or rather, saw the absence of it. About 40 yards away, near a large juniper, there was a distortion in the air, like the heat shimmer above hot asphalt, but vertical and roughly human-shaped. It was as if the background was being bent or warped around an invisible form. I froze, gas can in hand, staring at the phenomenon. It remained stationary for perhaps 5 seconds, then seemed to shift slightly, the distortion changing shape as if whatever caused it had moved. I blinked, and in that instant, it vanished. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I quickly refueled the chainsaw, but my hands were shaking so badly that I spilled gas on my boots. I wasn't going to stick around to finish the day's work. I needed to leave, to get back to the safety of my house. I secured my equipment as rapidly as possible, not bothering to load the freshly split wood onto the trailer. The ATV was parked about 100 yards away, at the edge of the clearing where the trail back to my house began. I had just started walking toward it when I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate steps that crushed twigs and displaced gravel. I increased my pace, and the footsteps matched it. I began to jog, and they quickened. By the time I reached the ATV, I was running at full speed, and the footsteps were right behind me, so close that I expected to feel a hand on my shoulder at any moment. I fumbled with the ATV keys, dropped them, bent to retrieve them, and as I straightened up, I felt something push me, hard, from behind. I pitched forward, landing face first in the dirt. The wind knocked out of me. I rolled over immediately, raising my arms to defend myself against my invisible attacker. But there was no follow-up attack. Instead, I heard those heavy footsteps rapidly receding, moving away from me and back toward the cutting site. The sound was accompanied by that same deep breathing, now coming in faster, excited pants that gradually faded into the distance. I didn't wait around to see if it would return. I started the ATV and rode back to my house as fast as the rough trail would allow, looking over my shoulder every few seconds, convinced that at any moment I would see that heat shimmer silhouette in pursuit. But nothing followed, at least nothing that I could see. That was the end of my firewood operation. I haven't been back to that part of my property since. I sold the hydraulic splitter the following week and took out a small loan to cover the increased costs of my mother's care. Sometimes, especially on still days when the wind drops, I think I can hear breathing outside my house, but I've never again seen that distortion in the air or felt the presence of whatever was watching me. Bigfoot is very strong. From Bryson. This was back in October of 2023, up in a remote area of the Olympic Peninsula. The timber company I work for had acquired rights to about 200 acres of woods. They needed a full site assessment before bringing in any equipment, something that should take maybe 2 or 3 days to complete. I'm a land surveyor specializing in pre-logging assessments, and I would be the one to survey this area. I had started that morning doing the perimeter work, marking boundaries and checking access points. The weather report mentioned a chance of rain, but that's nothing unusual there. Around noon, I moved into the interior section to start assessing tree density and ground conditions. The clouds were starting to roll in, but visibility was still decent enough to work. I should mention here that I'm used to working alone. Actually, I